Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear friends, to this new session of our Character Counts Forum. Today we're going to discuss about some of the important issues that might have arisen in your mind, and you might have discussed and debated over them. And I think that these are some of the issues that have a lot of importance in our lives. They keep coming up. Our parents invoke them, and at times, because of the fact that we are not fully aware of what the guidance is regarding them offered by a religion, we end up in all sorts of confusions. So I'll start off with the first segment just now, and the first segment, as you would have already noted, relates to the fact that every year Muslims fast regularly in the month of Ramadan, and at times they also fast at other periods and other times of the year. And one of the biggest questions which our youth actually face is that why is fasting made compulsory on all of us? Because it seems as if we are starving ourselves, and what's the need of depriving ourselves from essential ingredients that provide us energy, especially if we have exams, if we have to go for exercise, if we have to do some workout, if we have some assignments which are pending. So there's so many things going on in our lives, and it's not always a holiday. Of course, 30 days of holidays is something which is unthinkable. And why is it in the first place that we are asked in such a vehement way to fast for 30 days, or it's like a whole month of fasting, and it really depletes our reserves, it depletes our sources, and unless the rationale behind fasting is fully understood, perhaps it seems like a needless starvation sort of an exercise. So this question, I think, is a very fair question. If this question has ever arisen in your minds, it should not be a cause of any guilt. It is something which is but natural, and as I've always been telling you, my dear friends, that it's always good to thrash out questions and to find their answers. And when you do so, you'll find a new vigor in you and a new commitment in yourself in following a particular directive. Because if you follow a particular directive just because your parents have said so, or maybe if you read the Quran, you are able to catch this importance from the Quran as well. But if you don't know the wisdom behind something, or if you don't know why something is being asked, the commitment starts to dwindle, and it does come into question that why at all are such things being given by the Almighty, who knows that we cannot survive without nourishment. And unless this nourishment is provided to the body, essential daily tasks, of course, cannot be accomplished. So I'm just going to try to explain in a very brief way that what is the rationale behind fasting, and what makes us so committed to this, and how we can actually enjoy fasting. It's not just a suffering that we should go through, or a starvation that we should go through. It should be an enjoyable event, and it becomes enjoyable when we are able to understand why are we asked to do certain things, as I said, the wisdom behind. So you see, if you analyze yourselves, each one of us is a human being. Human beings exist on two planes. One is the physical plane, or the physical realm, and the other is the spiritual realm. So we are not just mere body, as perhaps is the case with animals. We have a soul inside us which distinguishes right from wrong. We have a sense of aesthetics. We have intellect. So these are the things which relate to a spiritual side of our existence. Of course, the material side of our existence needs a lot of nourishment, the physical side. So we eat, we drink, we hang out, we go for dinners, we go for parties, and all sorts of things that are able to nourish our body. And of course, the daily food as well, the breakfast, the lunch, the dinner, the tea, etc., etc. So they're all meant for our physical development. But you see, there is another plane, which is the spiritual plane. And fasting basically is something which escalates the fodder of the spiritual side of your personality. And that is God connection. You see, what happens is that your own soul is also in need of food, just as your physical body is in need for food. So you see, this food is something that you need to understand is not just the requirement of your physical being, it's the requirement of your spiritual being also. And that spiritual being and that physical being, they seem to get entangled all the year round. They are mixed up. They are, in fact, if you allow me to say, I'll say this, that the physical being or the requirements of the physical being, they get the better of the requirements of the spiritual being in all parts of the year, because our physical needs can be seen, whereas our spiritual needs are always difficult to grasp because we just cannot see them, although we might be able to feel them. But you see, physical being is something which gets the better of our spiritual being all the year round, although we have been prescribed a lot of practices during those 11 months, and of course including the 12th month of Ramadan as well, which keeps our connection with God alive. For example, we pray, we offer, we give in charity a lot, we are connected to God by understanding and studying the Quran. But this is a sort of a tussle that is always there, in which your physical being does not let your spiritual being get up. You see, it's like something of a struggle in which your physical being is always overpowering your spiritual being, and it's always under the physical being that spiritual being is being pushed. It tries to come up, and then of course the struggle goes on. And what happens in Ramadan is that the needs of your physical being, they are suddenly put to one side. So you see, what happens is that your spiritual being gets the time to grow. For 1 month, your physical being is given very little interference, is allowed very little interference in your spiritual being, because once you forsake eating, once you forsake drinking and other desires, the cardinal desires, of course what happens is your spiritual being starts to breathe, so to speak, as if it was in stress all the year round. It was not being able to breathe properly. But as soon as you lifted that burden of the physical being from itself, it arose and it started to develop, it started to nurture, it started to grow in a way that you felt as a better human being. And it is an experience that we all go through, that in Ramadan, all of us, when we do this collective fasting exercise, it becomes easier for us to do good things. So you see, those 13, 14 or 15 hours, or even the rest of the day, is the time in which we always relish, we always look back and remember that we had a wonderful Ramadan because of the fact that we were able to do this, and we were able to connect to God. So you see, to a student who is studying in a university or a college or a school, what we would like to explain is that if you just go on nourishing your physical being, it'll become fat, it'll become fit, it'll become sturdy, but your spiritual side will continue to be weakened unless you provide it with its fodder. And all the year round, as I said, there are a lot of exercises, a lot of practices that we can go through, which makes it strong. But there is 1 month completely in which we devote ourselves to actually nourish our spiritual being and lift off the desires which our physical beings has, and it tends to overpower the spiritual being. So you see, on the spiritual plane, you feel a person who is a better person during Ramadan most of the time. And this is the reason why we have been asked to fast at least 1 month in a compulsory way. Other than that, of course, we have those optional fasts that we can go through. But as I would just sum up my whole suggestion here, or my whole statement here in trying to diverge the wisdom of fasting, is that had human beings existed only on the physical plane, there would have been perhaps no fasting, because of the fact that our own soul does not need any nourishment as such, or go through such a month-long workshop in which we are able to do a certain exercise or pass through certain phases. But because of the fact that we have to acknowledge that we exist on a spiritual plane, and if you are spiritually strong, look what happens. So if you're spiritually strong, you'll be a truthful person. If you're spiritually strong, you'll be more sympathetic. You'll be more connected to God. You'll be more considerate to other people, even more kind to other people. You'll be a person who is always telling the truth, and for that person, telling the truth would come naturally. So you see, your character, basically, which is a manifestation of your spiritual being, that will grow in stature. Your character is basically not a representation of your physical being. Your physical being is basically like your body, which of course can be groomed and which can be built, and you will become a more fit person. You'll become a more attractive person as far as your physique is concerned. But what about that spiritual part? So you see, if you don't acknowledge that physical part, you'll tend to lose that grip on your spiritual part, and that is what our religion does not want to. And that is precisely the reason because of which earlier religions, all divine religions, have prescribed fasting. It's not something which has been done in the last Sharia for the first time. It was always there. So you see, if you understand this stress, you will have this urge to fight off that period in which maybe your fasting is making you uncomfortable, because now you know that you are doing it for a cause. You're doing it for a purpose. You are doing it for a certain objective, and that objective is to groom your character, to become a stronger individual, to take pressures, to take the brunt of life, and of course contribute as much as you can. So this is how our character and this is how our spiritual being are so intertwined. And remember, this forum is of course called basically Character Counts. So for us, it is very important that we realize this, and also remember that you don't have to wait for Ramadan every year to fast. You can fast any day, any time of the year. Of course, that would be an optional exercise, but believe me, if you do it, you'll find yourself with that same feeling in which you become a spiritually strong person. So I would say that perhaps what we need to revise in our life is that just as we have our targets set in the physical realm, let's fix a target in the spiritual realm also, and that is to improve ourselves as human beings, to become better people, to become people who are remembered even when we pass away from this earth. So much for fasting, and I do hope that if we are able to understand the wisdom, inshallah, the next time you'll fast, you'll be more inspired and you'll be more committed to that. And just as a disclaimer, I would also like to explain this, that at times it is really difficult for you to fast. It could be because of oppressive conditions of weather. It could be because certain things are assigned to you and you're not able to do it. It could be because of exams that are right in the middle of the month of Ramadan. So there could be a number of activities that might hamper your daily routine. In such a case, if you feel that fasting would be hampering your activity and it become almost impossible to do so, you can defer your fast. For example, if you are not able to keep some of the fasts for a particular reason, you can just leave them and then keep them in a later part of the year. So always remember that the Sharia of God, the Sharia means divine law. So divine law always caters for these exceptions, in which if you are not able to do an exercise or a certain worship ritual in an exemplary way, in the right way, you are given this concession that you can do it on other parts of the day or in other parts of the year. So remember this very clearly, and I do hope that inshallah this will really bolster your connection with God and make you a person who is also looking after his or her spiritual needs as much as is possible. Right. Now let's move on to the second segment. So we've just finished the first segment, which basically divulged the wisdom of fasting, and do try to understand it deeply as much as you can. And I always make this point, which I would like to repeat here, is that in cases of worship rituals, all the worship rituals that you do, for example, praying, fasting, going for Hajj or Umrah, doing charity, giving zakat, etc., offering animal sacrifice, all these have wisdom behind them. They are basically symbolic in nature. They connect you to God, and so you have to understand them if you want to offer them with enthusiasm, with zeal. So, okay, now we move on to the next part, and if I remember correctly, the next part is how can we draw up a personal plan for self-improvement. Remember, this thing came up in our last session when one of you had asked that is there a practical suggestion in which you can improve your character, you can improve yourself as a person. So I said that yes, inshallah, I'll come up with a suggestion. And in fact, I had been working upon this suggestion since many, many years. And so I'm just going to put it forward to you. And it is basically derived from Benjamin Franklin's proposal, in which he, at a very young age of 22, and you know, Benjamin Franklin was a polymath, he was a scientist, he was many things at the same time, and he was also one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. So he got obsessed at the age of 22, it is said, in excelling as a human being, in becoming a better person. And he proposed something which I have slightly modified to present to you in order to chalk out a practical plan. It's not just something which is a vague suggestion which tells you, okay, look, just analyze yourself, look upon your weaknesses, and become a better person the next day. So that is, of course, something of a principle statement. So the practical plan that I'm going to now present before you, as I said, is based on Benjamin Franklin's original scheme. And if you just Google him, you'll find out Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues, or something which actually outlines that how a person can become more virtuous, more pious, more dedicated, more caring, more sympathetic, more selfless. So what you can do in order to improve your character is that on your phone, maybe on a cell phone, or in Google Docs, or in an Excel sheet, or whatever, just write down on the left rows the 10 big qualities, or let me actually modify my statement, the 10 big flaws that you might have, or you think that you have. Or they could be less than 10, they could be more than 10. I'm just giving you an idea of the top 10 flaws, or maybe the top 5 flaws that you think you have. For example, anger management, for example, being rude, etc., etc. So write those things that you know that you have. You see, each person knows what he or she has as a bad habit and would like to give it up, so that he or she could become a further improved person. So write down those negatives, those bad habits on the left row, on the left column, maybe one after the other. So you can write the least bad habit. I mean, something which is of maybe the lesser of those 10 or 12 things, or 5 things, the least one on the top, and in ascending order go to the bottom in increasing intensity, so that these are the things that you want to get rid of. So what you're doing is you're writing a column in which in each row you are just mentioning those 5 or 7 habits, bad habits, that you would like to give up. Now on the front, on the just opposite the horizontal line, so I was just talking about the vertical line. On the horizontal line, in front of each, write the days of the week. For example, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and right up to Sunday. So your left column would be regarding your habits, the vertical line, and then your horizontal line would be regarding the days of the week. And this will give you a small box, if you're working in an Excel sheet, in each day. For example, if your leftmost row has the top bad habit that is written on that row is anger, and you have Monday right there. So Monday and anger, that'll become one box, and Tuesday and anger, that'll become a second box. So that in that way you'll find an Excel sheet which covers 7 days of the week, and for each day you have a box available for you. For each day you have a box available for you for each bad habit. And then you can multiply this week. I mean, this is 1 week. So what I'd suggest typically is to do this for 1 month. So you'll have 4 Excel sheets, or maybe 4 charts, and you can start them for 4 weeks. Week number 1, week number 2, week number 3, and week number 4. So in all you have 4 pages having those horizontal and vertical column. So I hope this is clear. So if this is, if anyone thinks that he or she is not clear, please speak up, because before I go further, it is essential that you understand this scheme. So if there is a silence from you, I would take it to mean that all of you have understood the scheme. But if any of you doesn't understand, please speak up at this moment. Okay, so it does seem that all of you have understood. Now what you do is, for each instance of that occurrence that you'd like to avoid, use a black dot or maybe a colored marker or whatever you have in your on your computer or your cell phone. And whenever you for example, I was going through that first portion in which you have a Monday, you are starting the week, and you have that anger thing written at the topmost, and write down the number of instances you got angry on Monday for each dot. So one black dot would mean that anger was something that you expressed when it came to you. And then use a red dot for that day in which you became angry, but you controlled yourself. So you see, the black dot would represent something in which a bad habit came to you to have expression, and you could not control it. And the red dot would tell you that you had that urge to do whatever you did not want to do, but you controlled it. Understand? So you will have for each day some black dots and some red dots, and maybe it could be blank totally, because that would mean that on that day none of those bad habits actually happened, or they never came to surface. So far so good? So we have a chart in which for 1 week you'll get black and red dots. So what you do is, you at the end of the week, you count the number of black dots and you count the number of red dots for each bad habit and write it at the end. Black dot for a bad habit that you could not control, and red dot for a bad habit that you could control. So for example, on Monday, for anger, you'll have 7 boxes covering Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And after Sunday, you have create another box in which you'll write the total, and preferably in the same ink or same color. So the black dots will total your anger for the week in which you were not able to control it, and the red dot or the red dots, the total number of red dots, will mention at the end of the week the anger that came to you and you were able to control it. And in this way you can compare for all those habits your own performance for 1 week. And this will be a practical reflection of who you are and how you behave, and how for a subsequent week you'd like the number of red dots to increase as much as possible and the black dots to decrease as much as possible. And you know what? In a way, Benjamin Franklin said that he would like what he had in mind was that he would like to achieve in which he would always have those red dots and never a black dot. And he said that day never came, because it's such a difficult thing to, be a perfect person. But in my own scheme also, I would suggest that this is something which I don't say that you have to be perfect in your life and you have to have all those red dots. But what will happen is that if you really after yourself in becoming a better person, the number of red dots the total number of red dots each week should increase. And when you go through this exercise for a whole week, and then of course for a whole month, 4 times in 4 weeks, what will happen is that it will give you a picture whether you are being able to improve or whether that will to reform yourself is not working properly and you are still losing. So this will give you a reflection of who you are, how much effort you are putting into it in reforming yourself, and what is the result that is being achieved. So 2 things that can now happen. You can just keep it to yourself, whatever the red and black dots total, and continue to try and make those red dots appear as much as possible. And the other thing that I'd suggest is, if possible for you, is to share with just one friend and mutually share how you fare. Maybe it could be more than one friend, any person who is your confidant. So you see, what happens is when you share these things, at times this is difficult. If you don't want to share, it's entirely up to you. It's not something of a mandatory nature. But if you think there are at least out of those 7 or 8 habits, maybe some of the habits you'd not like to share, and you'd like to keep them between yourselves and God. But then there could be some habits that you'd like to share with one of your friends, so that you could maybe learn from that person and that person could learn from you. And if you have a couple of friends doing that, that's also fine. Maybe a group sharing some of these things, because you see, these things, when you see from other people happening, if you have a positive attitude, they are always helpful. What they do is they inspire you that one of your friends is doing this, and what she'll do is, or he'll do is, they will actually share their experiences, that how they were able to overcome certain things that maybe you were not being able to do. So it's like helping each other out through the agency or through the means of that chart, and for each subsequent day of the month and the year, as I said, this can go on. And believe me that if you are able to do this, you'll really find yourself a person who is working on his or her own self, and without any external agency, without any external need, you are improving as a person, and you're going from better to the best, and you're becoming a high achiever. So I hope this scheme I tried to explain is evident to you, is clear to you, and if it is not, inshallah, we'll take it up in the Q&A session. But this is a practical plan, and this plan, if you can adopt in your life, it's just a simple plan to become a better person than before. I do hope that you'll gain a lot, and don't think that it's going to be red dots one day. No, because we are not angels, we are not people who can always be good all the time. So our target should be to be good most of the time. So we cannot be good all the time, but let us be good most of the time. So that is the target that we should like to achieve. Right. So now we come to the third segment, just shifting gears now, and the third segment, if I remember correctly, is that this is another issue which I think you must be experiencing in your life one day or the other, because of the fact that there are so many things which come up in life, and that is the issue of Zabiha, or the halal meat. And why is it that Muslims are so pushed, or maybe they are so they have been told in such a vehement way that they must never go near which is a meat which is not halal, which is not Zabiha. So what exactly, as I said, we need to understand the reason or the wisdom behind something, the Zabiha part, so that we are able to make the choice that we are making in a very, very committed way. If we are still eating non-Zabiha meat, we know what we are doing, and if we are not eating it, then also we should know that why is it that we have to abstain from it. Now, just let me explain that what exactly is Zabiha, and why is it that we Muslims, not just Muslims, all religions, all divine religions, all the Abrahamic religions were given the same directive regarding animal slaughter, that we are able to, we must understand, because this is something, if we don't, then of course one of the biggest part of our lives, one of the major part of our lives is these eating habits. So if these eating habits, or these dietary laws as you can call them, are not in consonance with what God has prescribed, then there's bound to be something which is going to arise and which is untoward. So there are two conditions for Zabiha meat, and anything to be called Zabiha has to have these two conditions, and I'll explain those two conditions now, and also the wisdom behind them, so that you are able to understand that why is it that this should happen. The first is that an animal can only be slaughtered by taking the name of God. You just cannot slaughter an animal without taking the name of God. And if this is not done, we would say that the first condition, which is tasmiyah. So tasmiyah means taking the name of God. Tasmiyah. Tasmiyah is how you would pronounce it or write it in these spellings in the English language. So tasmiyah means that whenever you slaughter an animal, you have to slaughter it by saying Bismillahi Allahu Akbar, which is a takbir, which is actually a manifestation or a representation that you have taken the name of God. Now, this is the directive as far as the directive itself is concerned. But the question arises, why? Why should we be taking the name of God, and what if we don't take the name of God? So here comes the important part that you must please be attentive to, and that is, you see, God wants to teach us that we cannot just become people who can take the lives of human beings. I'm not talking about animals as yet. I'm talking about human beings. It says that a human being's life is absolutely sacred. You cannot take the life of a human being. And unless, of course, there are certain reasons. For example, if he has taken the life of someone else, then that too the state authority is able to, has the privilege to exercise, and that state authority can do that. Other than that, your human life has such sanctity that you will not even touch it. So what happens here is that the Almighty goes a step down and comes to animal life. So he says that human life cannot be taken at any cost. He says even an animal's life cannot be taken. So that the sanctity of human life, which is a step above animal life, is always there unless God's name is taken. Understand? So God says that in fact, if I can rephrase it, I can say all life forms are sacred, whether they are human beings or whether they are animals. Of course, animals are a degree less than human beings. So God says, what to speak of human life, even a lesser life form like animal life is something that you just cannot take unless I give you permission. And that permission is exercised by saying Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And I think that if this permission was not given, I for one would have been a vegetarian, and I'm sure many of you would have been vegetarians, because the thought which comes our mind or which crosses our mind is that why should we take the life of an animal to please our own selves, to savor our own taste buds? We can rely on other life forms, or much lesser life forms. Of course, plants are also alive in a lesser plane, but of course there's a difference between plant life and animal life. So we would have been perhaps vegetarians, but it is this God's permission that He has said that He has made these animals for you, but you can only consume their meat if you invoke my permission, if you ask me. So you see, the first thing is you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, which means that God has given us the permission to take the life of an animal and use it for ourselves, so that we are always reminded that an animal life can only be taken through God's permission. What to speak of human life, that cannot even be touched. So in order to sanctify human life, lesser life forms like an animal life, they were also given this sanctity that even they cannot be, their life cannot be taken unless you ask me. That's what God has said. So this is the first condition, and this is the wisdom behind the first condition, that human life is to be protected. It's a lot that has to be protected, and for this, something which is even lesser holds the same sanctity, unless, of course, we have God's permission. The second important thing here is the blood of the animal has to be drained out. Because you see, if the blood remains in the veins or the arteries of the animal, what will happen is that invariably it will be consumed in eating as well. However much you might clean it, but still you'll find blood, or a large part of the blood still sticking within the meat, and that is why the animal has to be slaughtered in a way that the whole meat is drained out, the whole blood is drained out. And when that is done, the animal now becomes something which is just a collection of bones and, of course, fat and meat, and the blood part is drained out. And why is this a condition? This is a condition, my dear friends, because whatever we eat, our eating habits have an influence on our lives. If we consume blood, if we consume animals which are like carnivores, they for example tear apart their prey and they pounce upon them and eat their meat. So all such animals we abstain from actually eating, because you see, the animal or the type of animal you eat over a long period of time, the habits of that animal, they get transferred to people who eat their meat as well. So not consuming blood is something which is a symbol of the fact that we would not like to become savages, not become people who are beastly in their nature. So that is why it is important that the whole blood is drained out of their veins and their arteries, and the clean meat that is available, we are able to eat it. As far as that blood is concerned, if you eat it and consume it, you'll find out that people who are generally prone to these things, they are very savage in their nature. Not just savage, they are very aggressive. They have a lot of aggression in them. They have a lot of negativity regarding using their power is concerned. So this transfers, these habits transfer. So these are the two conditions which make a halal meat, a Zabiha meat. They both are synonymous. Halal and Zabiha is the same thing. So in order to take the life of an animal, you have to have the permission of God, and you must have the blood drained out. So any person who slaughters an animal, as long as he is primarily a monotheist, if he does slaughter a person and he fulfills these two conditions, then of course we can eat the meat of that animal. Unfortunately, in most part of the world, except for areas where Jews lived and Judaism is rampant, or we are given that kosher food, which is of course something which is done by them, that is perfectly okay because they fulfill both these conditions. But in most parts of the Christian world, I'm not saying all parts, but in most parts of the Christian world, the name of God is generally not invoked. We don't seek God's permission in taking the life of that animal. And at times the animal is stunned before slaughtering it, in which the blood actually freezes, or it deposits itself within the arteries and veins of the animal, which makes it, as I said, unhealthy to eat, and of course produces that savagery and beastliness which can arise as a result of consuming blood. So that is why when you go for a KFC or a McDonald's or any other burger, chicken burger for example, which is prepared by people who have neither taken the name of God nor done enough to slaughter it in a proper way, we say that this is non-Zabiha and non-halal. And the reason, as I said, is that the sanctity of human life had to be preserved, and this could have only been done if a lesser life form was also protected, and that was the animals. And God said that you cannot take the life. So in other words, people who slaughter an animal and do not take the name of God while slaughtering it, they don't have the permission to slaughter it. They were not given this permission. They were told that you should abstain from eating such an animal because I have created living beings, and any living being that can be slaughtered for the purpose of eating had to come from me, and that permission had to come from me, and you didn't take that permission. So I know there will be questions, and I'll leave those questions to your Q&A session. And now let me just shift to the fourth and final part of our youth session, which is of course a very interesting subject, and a very subject which is often discussed, I mean, amongst ourselves, and maybe amongst yourselves as well, and that is the issue of dating. So you see, dating is something which is so common now in most parts of the world that one does not even question it in any way, because this is something which, as I said, has become a norm. When it started off in a couple of centuries ago in 19th century France, as it is said, it actually was a means of courtship. So it was called chaperoned courtship. Chaperoned means it was always guided, it was always overseen by the parents, and for the matchmaking of their children. So in their presence, they would meet, girls would meet boys, or boys would meet girls, which would be their prospective husbands or wives. And this was one way of finding out if they would be compatible to each other and they would like to marry each other later on. So it started off in a very protected environment, in which chaperons, as you know, are people who basically oversee. They could be parents, they could be guardians, and they would like, in their own presence, if the boy and the girl, they think they could carry on maybe further and get married. So it started off from a controlled sort of a thing, and slowly, as you can see, and gradually, in the last last century, I would say, and in the last maybe 30 years, is an entirely new thing has been given, or an entirely new meaning to dating has been given, and it actually involves that you have premarital, extramarital relations with the person in question. And of course, this is perfectly something which is allowed. Allowed in the Western society is something permissible. People have children before they get married later, and this is something which goes on. And the purpose is that before you get married, you must get to know the person that you intend to get married, because if you don't, then of course, what will happen is that your marriages might tend to break. So this is the rationale behind the concept of dating, which has evolved in our societies, in many societies, and I would say it is now finding its roots in many Muslim societies as well. So you see, if I say what's wrong with dating, and I redefined it in a way in which maybe some of the evil aspects or the bad aspects are eliminated. I would say there's nothing wrong if it is done in a controlled environment, if you are able to meet your prospective spouse, maybe in the presence of your elders, maybe in the presence of some other people. And of course, the purpose is not pure friendship, as has become the norm. It's like a pure friendship in which you choose, in which you have all sorts of commitments made, and you do all sorts of things, and maybe you even change partners, and then you start off a new life with someone else. So it's like a temporary relationship that might materialize into marriage, or it might not. So what happens is that when you start having these temporary relationships, it becomes something of an addiction, or it can potentially become an addiction. And as I think I have explained this in some of our earlier sessions as well, that this is something which can be really bad for our ultimate married life. Ultimately, when you get married and you have a wife and the wife has a husband, if the proclivity still is there, if the tendency is still there that you would like to have friendship with women or with girls and girls with boys and vice versa, even after marriage, this proclivity seldom goes away, because there is such a strong attraction between girls and boys and men and women that once you start allowing it, or once you start going through it, it's going to take its roots and it's going to increase day by day. So one of the primary reasons what divine religions do is they try to protect the institution of the family. The institution of the family is something which needs protection, because for the well-being of the child that is going to brought into the world by the two, it is essential that this family institution is not dented. And when a boy or a girl or a man or a woman has this tendency of making friends outside marriage, there is always this danger that the institution of the family would get disrupted. So this is why it is not recommended that dating for the purpose of just being friends, or for the purpose of maybe a temporary friendship or temporary pleasure friendship, is recommended. If it is of the sort that maybe you're just making friends with a boy or a girl, and again the word friend, I would qualify that the purpose is that by getting to know each other, you just want to have a general idea. It could be physical, it could be face to face, it could be through the internet or other mediums of the other person, that it seems very okay. But if it goes beyond that and you start doing loose talk and you do all sorts of things, you crack jokes and you make yourselves very frank to the other person, so it is here that things can get out of bound. And if you control yourself in that area, you have your modesty around you, your chastity around you, and the purpose is to just acquaint yourself. And whenever you have the time, whenever you share moments in which you have to talk to the other person, it should be more towards your personal interest or geared towards how you are able to what your habits are, so that the other person is able to know who you are and you can share your own personality. So if this controlled environment and this controlled meeting can go on in a certain way, I think there cannot be any objection. But the way things are happening today and the way they are going and progressing now, as most of you would be knowing, that is not very acceptable. So it has to be changed. And the one thing also I'd like to add here is that, you see, one of the things that makes boys and girls meet each other for the sake of matchmaking is that they would like to find out who or she is in detail. But always remember, you see, when you are exposed to a boy or a girl in a limited span of time, when you're maybe meeting her and she's meeting him, always the good points come out. The bad habits, they don't get exposed. So what happens is that when you get married, you discover a new person, an absolutely new person. You knew that person before marriage, and that person was a charming person, was an attractive person, was a decent person, and suddenly when you get married, you find the same person having some other things which you never liked or would never like. Because, you see, premarital exposure does not bring to the focus those bad habits. As small bad habits, they could be worth ignoring. And but you see, what happens is that things, when they actually, when you start living 24/7 in one roof, you get a total exposure of your personality, and it is here that at times things don't work out. So remember, this is always a gamble. It is no guarantee that if you know your future spouse's personality, that he or she would be true to that personality, or always turn out what he or she looked like before marriage. Because once marriage takes place, people, the actual personality of a person manifests itself, and in many ways it is very different from what you had, or one of you had seen before marriage. So don't think that dating is an absolute, and it's something which can always offer you the best regarding the other person, and therefore you can make a choice. But as I said, if you have to make the choice, make it in a general way, but always think that this is not a sure shot way, because when these things happen, a lot of different things also come to surface. But cutting the long story short, I would say yes, if this is done in a way that the purpose is not just temporary pleasure relationships, or not just temporary relationships which can lead to these pleasure seeking relationships, and the purpose is just to get to know each other before marriage. And then, of course, if you feel, as I said, I think some sessions ago, that if you feel those emotions regarding the other person, if you fall in love, as you can say, and both of these prospective husband and wife, before they get married, they have this love for each other, then of course something else should be invoked, and that is that people like your family should be informed, and you should perhaps take the lead in informing them and tell them that this is how I feel about someone, and I'd like to maybe get married. And if that marriage is not possible at that time, then even a nikah, of course, that is something which can be formalized if that is possible. But you see, what makes it a sacred relationship is that it is not a secret one. So in order to make your relationship with a boy or a girl or a man or a woman between each other to be more pure, the more it is known to your close friends, the better it is. Because secret relationships, what they happen is, they can literally take you to certain extremes. They can damage your reputation. They can dent your reputation as a person. And for example, when you get really married, the time comes to get married to some other person, that previous partner or that previous person, he or she can just blackmail the other person and say, well, he was in a relationship with me and this thing happened. So you see, these secret liaisons, these secret relationships, they must be avoided. But a healthy relationship in which your purpose is to generally find out, and that too in a protected environment. So I would say that is the right way. And in fact, our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in fact recommended girls and boys to meet each other before getting married, so that after marriage they are not surprised to see something that they never had imagined before. So with these words, I'll come to an end to our study segments here, or these 4 segments that we have just studied. So now it's time for you for any question that you might have. And I always say this, and let me say it again. Whatever comes in your mind, please don't withhold it. It could be anything regarding these segments that might bother you, that you might not be comfortable with, or you would have further questions. So this is a platform, this is a forum in which we would encourage everything that comes into your mind that you can share. And if it is difficult for you to share in public, in front of other people, I'm always there in a personal capacity to help you out in these things. But the bottom line is that take it out of your mind. Just don't live with these problems or these issues, because they're going to blow up, and they could become nasty. So just have this discussion. Just say what you have in mind, and inshallah you'll find out that we'll help each other along as we go along in these sessions. So thank you very much, and over to you, Ghazal. Please start with the session.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. So thank you so much. Let's start with Ahmed. So please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. And I asked you this question as well. You told me to ask on this forum. So I was wondering about fish. Is fish, what's the thing about fish? Because people say you don't have to take the name of God when catching them. So what's the...
So that has been an optional thing. We have it's not been made mandatory upon us to take the name of God while cutting it up and eating it for ourselves, because of the fact that it is what I understand is that it is a more subtle form of death than the more blatant form in which the animal is slaughtered directly by your hand. So in the case of the fish, of course it is you who is responsible for the death of that fish, or for killing that fish, but it's very indirect. You're just depriving it of its environment by taking it out of the water, and it actually dies out of water. So because of the fact that it is not a blatant thing in which you are slaughtering a fish, that it is not mandatory regarding fish that you take the name of God at the time of cutting up that fish.
And sir, some people say that this calling the name of God is actually not farz at all, because they say that in the Quran, in Surah An'am, that actually this was just for a certain time, where the mushrikeen, they would sometimes slaughter animals, and they wouldn't say the name of their gods, but they would do it for them. So that's why they said that it's not actually farz, because Surah An'am, it's talking about mushrikeen anyway, so they take this context.
So they need to be told, if they read Surah Hajj, where the sacrifice of is actually mentioned primarily, you'll find out that the Quran has explicitly taken the name of Tasmiyah and said that Iza wajabat ala junubiha, so words to this effect, that when you make them lie down on their sides and then pronounce the name of God while slaughtering them, which actually is a explicit verse of the Quran, which tells us that even if those verses of Surah An'am are taken to be in the context of the mushrikun, although I would not agree with that, I think that's another thing. But let's say that if that argument is accepted, then there is this explicit verse mentioned in Surah Hajj that you can just locate and see how the Quran itself has said that whenever you slaughter an animal, the name of God has to be taken, has to be invoked.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, Mini, please or go ahead and ask your question.
I have 3 questions. I was wondering, do I just ask them all, or do I go in turns?
Considering we have not many participants who have raised their hands, so you may ask in one go.
Thank you. Okay. So the first one is, you said that humans have a spiritual and physical existence, but animals just have a physical existence. Does that mean they don't have souls?
Yes. For if they had souls, they would be knowing what right and wrong are. And of course they don't. I mean, to them what right and wrong is that never matters. All that matters is eating and grazing and producing children. So their lives have been there ever since they were born. Right and wrong, or deciding something which is of course something which takes the form of what right and wrong are, is never a bother if you observe their lives. They do have this distinction in some ways. For example, they have this sense of protection in which they will protect their young. They'll have this sense in which they would like the security for their own selves. But as far as right and wrong is concerned, I mean moral right and wrong is concerned, you can clearly see that this is something which is missing from their lives. Otherwise, they would not have been animals the way they are animals today.
Okay. And then the second question is, so you said that the blood must be drained because that's gonna change or affect your personal habits, but or like what you eat affects your personal habits, but that doesn't make sense biologically. Like whatever meat you consume, it's gonna be processed the same way. So like whether you're eating a chicken or I don't know, like a dog or a lion, it's gonna be processed the same way. So how is that gonna affect your habits?
So however much you actually process that, you see the way, if you minutely examine the meat, you see in our flesh and in our the skin below the flesh, you'll find that capillaries and veins and arteries running through them, which actually have that blood in them. So when you don't allow that blood to drain out, they actually become part of the meat. Even if you process the meat, they still remain part of the meat, unless of course the processing is done in a manner in which that blood is drained out, which to my knowledge is not adopted all over the world as yet. You see, what I'm trying to say is that if in principle the blood is drained out, then whatever the way, we have no objection. But the thing is that once at the time of slaughter, if you don't do it, that meat is going to, that the blood is still going to stick in some way or the other with the meat, even if you process it. It's going to become part of that meat.
Sorry. So, what my question was more like no matter what we eat, it's digested the same way inside us, regardless of what it is.
Right.
So why does it matter what meat?
This is as I said, because you see, when you eat the whatever meat you're taking or consume, it's not just the digestion, it's the thing that you consume. If you're consuming blood with the meat, for example, then that meat, of course, is something which is useful for you. It will provide nourishment for you. But the blood part is something, although physically it will be processed the way it's going to be digested. But what divine religions tell us is that if you start eating the meat of things which are savage in their own in their own consumption, in their own respect, then the habits of that particular animal, they start transferring to the person who eats them. So it's more of a divine knowledge that we are given, that if we do that, and look at the people who are cannibals or who drink blood, look at them. You'll find them, this is a classical example of how people who consume blood, pure blood, although they are in very minor numbers these days, but there are still tribes who consume blood, very small number of them. So the habits, if you study their habits, you'll find out that over a period of time, they have that savagery in them. And of course, it doesn't happen in a couple of generations. It goes on. It takes its effect in after a long time. But you see, what religion does is it makes that precautionary measure in which that situation does not even arise, if it is going to arise after maybe about a couple of 100 years. So that whole thing should not become part of a process in which you become ultimately human beings who might be human in their flesh, but they are savages in their habits. And when I say savage, it actually means having that extreme aggression in your temperament, having that extreme temperamental problem in your temperament. So all these things are make you that savage look, or give you those savage habits. So it's a question of realizing that although the processing of meat in the physical form excuse me, is of course going to be done by the body, but that thing is bound to have an effect. As I said, the example of people who eat the flesh of human beings, or example of people who consume the blood, is something which is before us and which tells us a lot about how their habits have developed and how they have ultimately reached this particular situation.
Couldn't it just be like correlation, but not
Well,
causation?
well, you see, this correlation is something which we as human beings can derive, but we are given this extra information by God Himself, that it could be correlation as far as human knowledge is concerned. But when a divine being is telling us that it's not just correlation, it's basically a causation. It's something of a cause and effect relationship. So this is where we actually try to understand that it's not merely a coincidence, because if hadn't been a coincidence, then this would have many exceptions, or maybe more than one exception. But we don't find that exception. People generally who are not very familiar with these things, or they don't give due respect to these things or due regard to these things, look at the manner in which they generally behave, the aggression that they have, the way that they would commit excesses against people of other nations, or even their own selves. So this is more of a information that we have been divulged by God Himself.
Okay, thank you. And then last question. So an argument for dating is that it's a way to test your sexual compatibility with your partner. Without doing that, and if you walk straight into marriage, then you don't know anything about your partner you're going in. And I know some people whose marriages could have been saved if they would have had that thing happen to them before getting married.
So are you talking about general compatibility or sexual compatibility? I mean,
oh no, sexual compatibility.
What exactly does that mean?
So, for example, I personally knew someone who just couldn't have sex, but like it took them getting married to find out that they couldn't have sex, or they couldn't.
So you see,
like,
this is sort of a this is not the general rule. This is an exception. I mean, this doesn't happen all the time. if you just count the number of cases in a given sample, maybe it could be less than 1%. And you see, for such things that something cannot be happened, we do have treatments, we do have a lot of things. And as I said, there are certain things which only appear after marriage, which cannot be sample tested before marriage, as I said, because of these reasons, that you don't get fully exposed to the other person the way it is done. And then, as I said, that for such a small percentage, we just cannot risk the whole institution of family, because if you allow this for this small percentage, what would happen is that everyone would indulge in those sexual relations before marriage, and the institution of family, which is an institution that we need to protect, so that the proclivity of this sexual urge for the other person dies away once you get married, it will persist. And I think this is something that we can see from our own eyes today, that that people who had this premarital sexual relation, once they get married, they still have that urge to look outside the marriage bond and to have that satisfaction derived from outside marriage relationships. So this is how I would view it, and I think that exceptions, they have to be dealt with in a separate way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Hamza Ahmed, you are next. Please ask your question.
Thank you. So I have a question regarding the Eid al-Adha, which is coming ahead, and is it permissible for us to just do the Qurbani via some organization and give money to them and then do them?
Hamza, I'm going to discuss. I do plan to take up this topic in a more comprehensive manner, inshallah, in the coming week, because Eid is around the corner, and maybe I think the next session we're going to have is on the 19th, which is well before Eid. So inshallah, I'll try to explain the whole concept of animal slaughter and Eid and Qurbani and all these things in a complete segment. So if you could just wait for a week.
Okay, so but I have another question, that you said that if we have some extreme emergency, we can delay our religious practices like namaz and the fasting, etc. So the religious paradigm that exists around us is, they tell us that yes, you can delay something, you can delay namaz, you can delay fasting, but if you do so, you will never be able to get to that place if you do that on the proper time. So if we miss the month of Ramadan and then complete the number of fasts in some other month, then are we going to lag behind other people?
Certainly not. This is not correct, because you see, the Quran itself is very vocal on this, and it is said that if you're not able to fast because of some reason, and the two reasons which the Quran is cited are that one, that you can be on a journey, you could be traveling, and the other is that you could be sick. But all it said is that you just make up for those fasts. It never said that if you fast in other times of the year, it would have lesser reward or lesser placement before God. It never said that. It only said that this is a legitimate reason because of which you cannot fast. And of course, we can add other legitimate reasons as well to this list. So any legitimate reason for which you are not able to fast and you are able to make it up. Otherwise, the Quran should have mentioned here, well, okay, if you are not able to fast due to your traveling or due to becoming a person who is sick, you can make it up in other parts of the year. But hey, listen, this would not be as weighty or as rewarding as the original fast. The Quran never said this. It actually acknowledged the fact that a person was legitimately not able to do a certain thing, and this is of course something which happens in our religion all the time. Whenever you are not able to do something in a way which is prescribed, you are always given an alternative. For example, if you're not going to pray or not able to pray while standing up, you can still pray while sitting down, or by even lying down, or by even your gestures. What is that? Or when you're not able to do wuzu, you can do tayammum, which is dry ablution. So you see, lesser forms which could be generally thought of as less, but they are basically replacements for the original form. They have been prescribed by religion itself. If you see this, that spirit of religion is how it actually replaces the original requirement with another requirement. You can clearly see that this is the way God has prescribed us, and He has never said that this is something which will deprive you of some reward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nida Basim, you are next. Please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum.
Actually, my question is regarding two of the segments that you mentioned today. One is the halal meat as well as the marriage. So, generally in Muslims, the Muslim men are allowed to marry in a Christian as well as the Jewish household. But somehow we're only allowed to eat in a Jewish household. So I do not quite understand that while even Christians are given the decree that they're not supposed to convert even after marriage to a Muslim. How is it that the food is only halal in one household and not the other?
So this is because in the times of the Prophet we were given this this permission because the Jews and the Christians were actually very similar to each other. They were slaughtering the way the slaughter is done, but gradually as this started to fade away, of course this is something that we witnessed that it no longer happens in Christian households, whereas it's still stuck to in Jewish households. So it is something of a deviation that happened. But when this permission was given, in all probability, I reckon that it was there that both were actually following these dietary laws, and that is why it is said وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ, which means that the food of the people of the book is permissible to you, because of the fact that it had been all those things which had been removed from it, which were making it non-permissible. But as I said, this is something, and actually it was something which happened immediately in Christianity right after the passing away of Jesus, because Saint Paul actually revoked a lot of the things which are found in the Old Testament and in the Sharia of the Old Testament, which Jesus had said that he would be following in all letter and spirit. But Saint Paul actually, I would say, revoked that Mosaic Sharia. Because of this, that Christians very earlier on had actually given up this slaughtering in the name of God, and in the times of the Prophet, when they were given this permission, it was because of the fact that they, of course, had started to follow it. But of course, as I said, that it was case to case that we need to judge in that matter. But the bottom line is that whether they are Jews or whether they are Christians, this is something which was meant in the Mosaic law. I mean, the law which was given by Moses and upheld by Jesus and upheld by Muhammad. So all the three prophets had the same dietary law given to them. So what happened is that one of the followers, many of the followers of Jesus revoked it, as is the case with the Pauline Christians. But the followers of Jesus, who came through Peter, one of his rightful disciples, they stuck to this, I presume. So this is a deviation, I would say, which evolved. If you know this history, which I just briefly described, that it was there, but because of the fact that these laws were same for all the three Abrahamic religions, it was said. But when they stopped following it, of course, the non-permissibility had to come in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ahmed Shoaib, you are next. Please ask your question.
Yes, sir, I had a question. If blood makes people savage, as you said, or it causes them somehow to get this psychology, then why don't we see, like in Europe or in America, or people eat these things that they're savage? And what would happen if, for example, someone was given meat, it was the meat of a cheetah, he ate it? Would he get the effects of that?
So, as I answered this doesn't happen so quickly, and it happens over generations. It is something which enters in a nation and they become more akin towards such animals. And remember, this savagery that I'm talking about is not just savagery the way beasts are, savagery in killing. Look at the amount of killing which is going on, the temper the people have, the aggression the people have, and these things, they appear in such people, or they have appeared, I would say, although they might not have those extreme habits. But there are grades of these habits that we can even witness today in people who are consuming this meat in such a way. So it's not always ending in killing. The temperamental aggression, the way things go on in personal lives, There are a lot of things that they do surface and they make headlines, and we know there are a lot of families who have this for this particular reason. I mean, there could be other reasons as well, but because of the fact that divine Sharia has told us that eating habits have an impact on one's personality, that we can extrapolate and try to find out that what exactly are these habits that are still happening, and one of the causes could be the type of food that they are consuming.
Okay, I have this one sub question and another, if I'm allowed. So, my sub question was that where in the, because this is something new that I'm hearing, that these animals cause this sort of behavior. So, if you could provide maybe a scientific thing or maybe something in the religious.
So I just gave this example of blood consumption, in which tribes who drink blood still exist. The habits that you see, this is an extreme example. When you consume an animal whose blood is not drained away, it's not that you're consuming blood. You're just contaminating yourself with blood. So blood is entering your diet. It's not that you're drinking blood. It's like it's entering, and because of the fact that religion tries to stop people way before things get out of hand, that even these small quantities are stopped. So if you want a scientific evidence, you can see these cannibals, you can see these blood-consuming tribes, and the way they behave, and the society that they live in, and the way their general mannerisms are. You'll find them over a period of, because this has happened for a period of long evolving centuries, a long time, and it has culminated in this situation. So you can, I mean, this is one of the areas, but as I said, it's not just the meat, the blood in the meat. It's like a precautionary thing which the Almighty has stopped us, because you see, the ultimate thing which produces that savagery is drinking blood. But because of the fact that these small quantities of blood, they remain stuck with the veins or in the animal meat, so we have been stopped, because this is something which might lead up to that you ultimately consume a lot of blood. This has never happened in Western nations as yet. But you see, the Almighty is very, very sensitive on these things, that savagery or ultimate blood consumption or human flesh consumption should not be something which should become part of our lives. So we have been stopped way before those things trickle in. Even then we find those trickling things still happening. But remember, they will only happen in their perfect form once you actually start drinking blood. But because of the fact that you stopped much before, those habits are not found in their extreme form at the moment.
Sir, I agree with you. I think they are in a Yorkshire pudding. I'm pretty sure it's just pig's blood. So I think that proves your point. And my second question was that in Surah 13 it says that man was created in the best mold. So then this question comes, that why do we have to do so many things to ourselves to make ourselves more
well, I'll recommend that you read the tafsir of Surah 13 written by my teacher Javed Ghamidi, or his teacher Amin Hassan Islai, because it does not mean man as a whole, as in general. It refers to people of the ummahs of the 3 or 4 prophets of God who are mentioned in the oaths. For example, Wateen wa Zaytun represent the nation of Jesus. Wahazal Balad al Amin represents the nation of Muhammad, which was born in Medina, in Makkah. Balad al Amin, which is of course the city of the Prophet. Watur Sinin, of course, the Mount Sinai, which is the place where the Ummah of Moses was instituted. So the Laqad Khalaqnal Insan does not mean insan in general or all mankind in general. Remember, the Alif Lam or insan is a definite article, and it refers to some particular entities of the category of human beings. So it is referring to these 3 prophets, the ummahs of these 3 prophets, and telling us that when they were instituted by these prophets, when they were living, at the time these prophets were living, they were created in the best of molds, but they ultimately decided against it, and they end up from the lowest of the low. So always remember this, that it's not al-insan whenever it is mentioned in the Quran. It refers to all human beings or all insan. There's always a subset, there's always a definite article which actually refers you to a specific chunk of mankind.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'll go for the written questions that I received from the participants. Um, First of them is, what does the Quran says about menstruation and fasting and making up the fast afterwards?
So the answer to this question is that the Quran, although does not say anything in this regard, but the established practice of the Prophet, which has been conveyed to us, is that if women start menstruating during fasting, they need to break their fast, and then as long as they menstruate, they should abstain from fasting, and the missed fast should then be kept later on. And I today in these last couple of years, maybe even a decade, I do see women taking those tablets when they go for Hajj, because in Hajj also you cannot do tawaf if you are menstruating. So what they do is that when the month of Ramadan comes, they consume those tablets, of course under a doctor's guidance, a doctor's prescription, not individually. This actually makes them able to fast the whole month without any disruption. But however, if this disruption does take place in which you menstruate, then you have to break your fast, and you have to keep it in some other part of the year when you're not menstruating.
Thank you. The next question is about faith marriages. Do you want to take it now, or are you planning to go for another session dedicated to
because
the
we're going
topic?
to take this up as a separate discussion, so better if we could just wait on it.
Okay, great. So I'll go for the next question. Although it's from the previous sessions, but considering we don't have any other questions, so I'll take them. The first one is, can we be friends with our homosexual friends? Can we publicly raise our voice against homosexuality? For example, when someone asks what is our opinion regarding that, and just keeping in mind that this is happening publicly.
Right. So the first thing is that making friends with such individuals is absolutely no problem. I mean, you could differ with their orientation. You can have a different orientation yourself, but they are human beings. They are creatures of God. They could be very loving people. They, of course, are in most cases very, very good human beings. So there's no reason to isolate yourself from such people. And I can extend this to the LGBTQ community, all of them, as far as they are concerned. You can have cordial relationship with them. In fact, if you are able to come close to them, it's all the better, because I mean, why should you isolate yourself from a person who has a different orientation? As far as raising your voice against homosexuality is concerned, it again depends where and when and how. I mean, this doesn't generally I mean, it could be a case in which there could be a protest going on, or maybe people who are conversing against this. In elections, this happens in some countries. You can, of course, give your opinion, because that opinion is your personal opinion. And that personal opinion is that if you have this opinion, of course, that it is something which is disliked, and so I would not be in favor of that. If you give that opinion in public, it is your right, and the other person, just as you should respect the other person's opinion who thinks that it is correct, you should expect the other person to respect you as well if you differ with him or her. So you see, today I can see in the Western societies, talking against homosexuality has become a taboo. It's virtually impossible, because you think that you'll just be blacklisted. I think this is a case of intolerance that I find here, I smell here, because just as you are tolerant enough to say that your matter regarding your sexual orientation is between you and your God, as far as I'm concerned, I would like to be friends with you. In a very similar way, the other person should not feel offended if I give this opinion, because it is my right to give an opinion. Because in spite of giving my opinion, I'm still according that other person the same status as a good human being. So I think this intolerance is something that should not be tolerated. It should be politely brought to discussion and said that my personal opinion could be my personal opinion, but that doesn't affect our relationship. And of course, this is something which, if I respect your orientation or your opinion that something is okay, you should respect my view if I say that something is okay. And this is something which goes on in every issue of life that we come across. It's virtually in every issue, not just here.
Thank you so much. So the other question is regarding shaping eyebrows, although we have the dedicated session for it, but seems like the confusion is still there. So I'll read the question. So the participant is referring to ayat 119 from Surah Nisa, and it says that and I shall command them, and they will disfigure Allah's creation. And shaping of eyebrows is literally altering creation. So how can we say that it's okay to shape the eyebrows when it's
Well,
written like
the simple answer is that if you think that it comes under altering the creation, don't do it. My opinion is that is come in the verse. This verse is talking about an entirely different thing. It is talking about certain religious innovations which Satan would try to induce amongst human beings. They would try to change their ears and their eyes in a way that certain religious rituals were actually attached to them. So I think you would just need to pick up a good translation and a commentary of the Quran to tell you what exactly those words mean when it says that when the Satan is saying that I'm going to change their appearances. So it's not just a simple change of appearance. It is in challenge to God, that they will disfigure themselves in a way that they'll no longer follow the religion of Tawheed, and they'll have certain innovations adopted in their lives. But if anyone thinks that this relates to eyebrows, he or she is free to take it as it is. I was just expressing my understanding, and I don't claim that I'm always right.
Thank you so much. The last question we have from Ahmed, although it's not related to the topic, it's about soul and evolution. We still have good 9 minutes to go into for the session. So if you are up for it, we can probably take it.
Right. Please
All
do.
right. So Ahmed, please unmute your mic and go for it.
Sir, some people say that the soul that we talk about as religious people is just a product of evolution to make sure that our species speaks the truth to each other, and to make sure that the species kind of keeps on going safely. And it's not an actual thing. It's just, I think maybe some people call it the social contract or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So you want to, how do you prove the existence of the soul?
Yeah.
Well, it's like very much like proving the existence of God. You cannot see God, you can feel God, you can have certain signs around you which make you feel that there is someone who created you. In a very similar way, you just cannot see your soul. So you see what has happened is that today we have become slaves to our faculties, especially the faculty of the eye. And I think that this is in itself something very questionable, because for something to exist, you don't need to see it. Like for example, the force of gravity. Who has seen gravity? I can clearly say this, that no person at all has seen gravity. So I think the first thing that such people should do is that they start denying things which they have not seen, and start off with denying gravity.
Okay, so what would the answer be? Even if we can't see it, their hypothesis
So,
is then just as valid as ours.
So you see, the hypothesis is that this soul is a part of our life in which our personality behaves. What we are in our physical form is something which is just an external manifestation of a thing. When we do something right, when we make a decision, when we have this inclination of right and wrong, when we think that we have a conscience. So I think the first thing that they need to understand is that, is the conscience also a product of their material body? If it is, then where is it? I mean, everything which is material can be seen. You can see the heart, you can see the eyes, you can see the liver, everything which is inside. So these people would need to deny conscience also, which of course they cannot, because you see, there is something in you which always tells you what right and wrong is. So if there is something in you, then you have to locate that, because if you say that it's some physical part of your body, as these people should claim, then where is that physical part of the body?
I think some people say it's brain waves and you can see them on machines.
I think that this is something which is still debatable, and you have not located at all. It's just conjecture that is going on. You see, when you say something and you say this located on machines, how can you be certain that this right and wrong is a machine sort of a thing? I mean, what is right and what is wrong is something which, if you ask me, is expressed through the brain. That is why you have those brain waves at times. But where is the origin? How do you feel that thing? How do you feel that sympathy for the other person? How do you feel to become a selfless person? Why do you want to be kind? So you see, these moral values, you cannot locate the origin of these moral values in your human body, at least so far. We don't have the origin of these values wherever they are. I mean, a person is very kind. Some other people are there very unjust. Some people are they are blatant liars, and everything is coming from you. So would you say that lying is something which is coming from your human body, or being kind is something which relates to your human body? So I think these are some of the questions that they need to answer, and as far as I know, there is not a single convincing answer as yet.
Thank you so much. We don't have any other questions, and perhaps we can conclude our session for the day.
Okay, just one thing before we part. I thought that if I could give a small assignment to any one of you, maybe more than one people, if out of their own sweet wish, there's nothing at all mandatory, and that is that we have covered about, I think, 20, maybe, or 16, or maybe how many, something close to 20 topics in these 4 or 5 sessions. So I think the list of those sessions would be there with you in your messages. So I would like some volunteers that if they could just pick up any one of the topic, each one a different one, of course. If we have 20 topics, maybe we could have 20 volunteers or so. Even if less, that's okay. Just choose one of those topics, listen to what I've said, maybe just the recording. Just write down a gist of it, and not just a gist of it. If you could add something from your own self, maybe search the internet, maybe give some new input into it, maybe add some dimension to it. So that would actually be something which might be more helpful to you in actually remembering things and in actually doing some of the things that we have already done in the past. So I would say if 20 volunteers are there to maybe pick up those any 20 topics, and even they could be repeated. I mean, it's not that you should have different topics, because each one is going to have a different input as well. So a very brief summary of what maybe I've said, and then what you can add through it from various sources. You can even ask your parents, your teachers, the internet, etc., and just write one page maybe, or a couple of paragraphs if possible. This will help you in analyzing things. This will help you in grasping certain facts, and also increase your power of expression. As I said, it is not mandatory at all. It's just a pure voluntary sort of a thing. And if you're able to do it, I think Ghazal can coordinate with all of you in this regard also. I know that you had a previous assignment as well. Some of you have responded, and today I'll receive the feedbacks, inshallah, too, and I'll go over them. But this is something different, in which if you have time and if you would like this to happen, and here is something that you can do in your spare time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. This is awesome idea. I believe we can perhaps circulate it via email, and maybe we can come up with some Google Docs and things. So I will request all the participants that if you are interested in any particular topic, do write it back to me, and we can circulate among all the participants. So we'll come up with something which is beneficial to all. So I'll be sending an email soon regarding that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Goodbye.
You so much.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.